Hello, good afternoon. Maybe when you look at the colours, what you see is round the other way from the way I see it. Maybe when you look at red, the sensation you have is the same as the sensation I get when I look at something green. Maybe all the colours you see are systematically round the other way from the way I see them. We'll look at this possibility. How many of you have thought of this already? Yeah, there's something about philosophy classes. People tend to come into this when they've been troubled by this kind of thing since they were 12. But we'll talk about that kind of scenario and what it means on Monday, looking at Martina Niederrumeland's paper, Pseudo-Normal Vision. Today we're going to look at the possibility of something that's functionally just like you or me, but it's not that their sensations are around the other way. They don't have any sensations at all. But first of all, let's just say something about how we got to where we are. Last time we were talking about variable realizability. Variable realizability? Variable realizability. The idea that given a particular mind with a particular set of psychological possibilities open to it, you could have exactly the same kind of mind but made out of different stuff. Our minds are made out of carbon. You could have the very same kinds of mind made out of a different stuff, made out of silicon. And we get this the whole time when we're thinking about science fiction possibilities. It really seems to be real when you're thinking about other animals, our old friend the octopus, and even in a single individual over time, some parts of your brain might take over the function that other parts had. What used to be doing the work of vision might come to be doing some of the work of hearing. So it seems kind of obviously possible that you could make a mind out of different kinds of stuff. But what does that tell us about what we're going to say mental states actually are? There's something about the whole project of saying what mental states actually are, what the feeling of pain is, that is, I don't quite know how to put this, it's somehow intrinsically mind-bending. So imagine the top of your head was cut off and you had a mirror on a stick so you could look at your brain. And then you look around you and you say, look, all these sensations, all these experiences that I'm having right now, that's all there. That's the same thing. It's a really natural idea. How could that be? That makes no sense. In office hours this morning, I was talking to different people and getting the same reaction to, once you get what the behaviorist is saying, the behaviorist is not saying pain causes behavior or pain accompanies behavior. The behaviorist is saying the pain actually is the behavior. That seems crazy. How could anyone think that? Or the functionalist says not that pain has a particular kind of functional structure, but that being in pain just is having this functional structure. How could that be? It makes no sense whatever. I mean, I think when you think about what's surprising about that, it's kind of as if you're told, here's the pain, it's this fiber firing here, something in the mirror, and you think, well, how could that be? I suppose that down from the Maths Institute, people said, look, we've made a fundamental breakthrough. Here we have the number 9. It turns out to be a small rock. Here it is. Duplicates are available. And they say this is a great breakthrough. We have a team working on 7. Anyone's reaction is, how could that be? I mean, your natural reaction is, well, I'm sure the maths is just great, but that can't be right. The number 9 just couldn't be a small, could it? I don't know, things move so fast these days. You, you guys seem pretty unastonished. But I think it couldn't be a small, is that right? Is this a generation thing? How could the number 9 be a small rock? Could it? Could it? If some distinguished mathematician swept down from the Maths Institute and said, here we have it, it's been located at last. Your natural thought is that just doesn't make any sense at all. And I think with saying a mental state is C-fiber firing or a mental state is a functional structure, you have the same natural reaction. That just couldn't be what it is. That makes no sense. That's why dualism is appealing, because you don't know what ectoplasm is, and you think, well, whatever it is, it doesn't... Since I don't know what ectoplasm is, I can't be astonished by the news that pain is made of ectoplasm. Pain is a configuration of ectoplasm. Since you don't know what ectoplasm is, you couldn't be confused by the message that the number 9 was a bit of ectoplasm. I mean, since you have no idea what ectoplasm is, well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. But whenever you get something where you know what it is, the question, how could that be the feeling of pain? How could that be a feeling of sorrow? Is really puzzling, right? It really has that dumbfounding reaction, but that's a crazy idea. And one way of seeing the appeal of functionalism is that it tries to explain how you can make sense of this kind of identity. It says any mental state has a particular characteristic set of causes and effects. Take the feeling of sorrow. You can say what causes it. You've got some tragic event in your life, something bad happens. You pay attention to that bad thing. Okay, this is not terribly hard to do, right? You can just spell this out. What happens when you're feeling sorrow? Someone you love has died. What happens next? You ruminate, you go over and over it. Other emotions come into play. As Yoda said, grief. Grief leads to anger. Anger leads to suffering. You know how that kind of thing goes. And then these feed back and generate further sorrow. And then, once you know what that functional structure of sorrow is, you can look and say, well, what in the objective world has that functional structure? And if it turns out it's a brain state there, on the one hand, you could say, well, that's the brain state. There is a feeling of sorrow. That would make sense of saying the feeling of sorrow was an electrochemical discharge. Or if you're impressed by variable realizability, you can go on and say, well, actually, any state that has that functional structure will count as sorrow. And I said that kind of functionalism actually is science's philosophy of mind. Scientists studying the mind are in the business of breaking down the brain into its components and then giving you a box and arrow diagram of how all those components are related and what they're doing. That's what the scientific study of the mind is. I guess I just said sorrow leads to all this other stuff. Sorrow leads to rumination, further emotion, back to sorrow. How do you know that's true? How do you know what the functional role of a psychological state is? Do you know what the functional role of a psychological state is? No idea? Sorrow leads to joy. Great good news makes you sorrowful. Is this another generation thing? That can't be right. You just start out commonsensically and you can say what the structure of sorrow is. I mean, you don't really know what sorrow is unless you've understood that bit of the functional role. Or you might say, no, it's up to science. Science doesn't just generate the box and arrow diagrams. Science can look into what causes people to... I mean, after all, there is a whole science of happiness. Scientists studying what causes people to feel happy, what the effects of happiness are. Is it good for the economy, and so on. But there are actually a number of different answers you could give here. One is, when you just learn the meaning of the word sorrow, you know what its functional structure is. But it's also possible that when you think about why it's important to us, just in ordinary life, to know about phenomena like joy or grief or sorrow, it doesn't matter so that you can draw box and arrow diagrams of them. I mean, who cares about drawing box and arrow diagrams? What's really important is how in practice you interact with other people. Someone said of a friend of mine, he just doesn't know how to behave around people. And you know what that means, how you can behave around people, how you react to someone's sorrow. You might actually show in the way you react to them that you have a really good, sophisticated, rich understanding of what the functional structure is. But it might be that when you come to spell it out, you're not very good at spelling it out. Just as you might be able to tie your shoelaces, and you might be a real whiz at tying your shoelaces, but when you come to write down how you tie your shoelaces, you don't do it too good. But you could be great in practice at interacting with other people, but just go wrong when you try to make that articulate. So one picture of what's going on when we have this kind of diagram is that this is stuff we all know in practice. This is like tying your shoelaces. But when you try and write it down, you can make mistakes that you wouldn't actually in real life in practice. Okay, so much for functionalism, how we got there and what it's doing. Does that make sense? Does it seem like a crazy view? Do we understand what the view is? Actually, put your hand up if you're comfortable with what functionalism is at this point. Higher. Right. And if you're not comfortable with what functionalism is? Whoa. Okay, right. Let's pause for a second. Okay. Well, what about electrical circuits? What about the concept of a switch in an electrical circuit? Is that put up your hand if you're comfortable with the idea that the concept of a switch in an electrical circuit is a functional idea. And if you're not comfortable with that, higher? Okay, good, right. Okay, so the concept of a switch is a little bit abstract. It's defined by its inputs and outputs, yeah? What about the idea of a mood, like being grumpy? Can't that be functional? I mean, being in a mood like being grumpy, that's just a matter of how you're going to react when people approach you. And is there any more to being grumpy than that? If someone asks you for a favor, then you'll be more inclined to help them. Yeah? Yes?
So what's the difference between that example and a behaviorist approach?
So far,